Welcome to the DragonCruiser. We're just outside the legendary Shaolin Temple. Yep, that's right. We are here now trying to bring a bit of a first-person view right to you, our audience. And honestly, it's the perfect backdrop for what promises to be a truly wild story.
It really is an incredible setting, though maybe ironic, given the narrative we're about to unpack isn't exactly tranquil. We're getting into the story of Shi Yongxin. You probably know him as the CEO monk.
That nickname says so much, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The contrasts are just bewildering. A spiritual leader who fully embraced, maybe even pioneered aggressive capitalism within a monastery. A guardian of ascetic vows who, reportedly fathered multiple children. And a celebrated cultural ambassador who's now facing this massive public disgrace.
Exactly. That core paradox is just stark. The scent of incense, the traditional atmosphere you'd expect here, it feels like over his time it was increasingly replaced by the clatter of commerce.
Yeah, totally. So our mission today is basically to unpack all of that. The dramatic transformation of this 1,500-year-old birthplace of Kung Fu. We'll trace his pretty meteoric rise, look into this shocking tapestry of alleged financial issues, personal betrayals, and ultimately try to understand the implications of this current criminal investigation.
It's quite a journey. From his humble beginnings, through this unprecedented commercial boom and global outreach, right up to the recent, really explosive unraveling of his whole empire. It really challenges a lot of assumptions.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. Shaolin Temple, back when Shi Yongxin first arrived in 1981, it was apparently in a really, really dilapidated state.
Oh, completely. We're talking maybe only a few dozen monks left. It had suffered centuries of neglect, plus that huge fire in 1928, and then, of course, the Cultural Revolution took a heavy toll. It was pretty much a shell of its former self.
And into that walks Liu Yingcheng. That was his birth name, right? Born in 1965. He formally entered Shaolin at just 16 in 1981.
That's right. And what's really remarkable is how quickly he climbed the ranks. By 1987, just 6 years later, he was already in charge of temple affairs, director of the management committee.
Wow.
And then, August 1999, he becomes the 30th generation abbot. He was only 34, made him the youngest abbot in Shaolin's entire recorded history.
That's just astonishing.
Yeah.
And clearly, once he got into leadership, he saw the, let's say, cultural and commercial potential.
Yeah.
Now, part of me looks at that and thinks maybe it was a necessary, bold move for survival. Like almost heroic to bring the temple back.
Well, that's exactly the tension, isn't it? That's the crux of the debate. Some argue it was absolutely necessary. Shaolin was struggling. It needed resources. But others, they contend that this aggressive commercial drive fundamentally compromised the temple's spiritual core.
Right. It begs that question. How far can a sacred place adapt to the market before it, loses its soul?
Precisely. It's not just about economics. It's about identity. A really difficult line to walk.
Well, whether it was necessary adaptation or spiritual compromise, he certainly didn't waste any time. This empire, it took shape fast. He set up the Shaolin Monastery Wushu team.
Which became that global monk delegation touring everywhere. Even early on, remember they were doing fundraising stuff down on Hainan Island way back in 1989? Real hustle.
A real hustle indeed.
Yeah.
And a huge part of his strategy was locking down the brand, right? Protecting and industrializing Shaolin.
Absolutely pivotal. In 1993, he actually won a lawsuit against a local sausage maker for using the name without permission. Can you believe it? Sausages.
Sausages. Okay, that's quite something.
But it was a landmark case. It set the stage for creating the Henan Shaolin Industrial Development Company in 98. That was specifically to consolidate control over the brand. And by 2008, the brand got official state protection.
And boy, did it pay off.
Yeah.
The revenue streams became massive. Kung Fu shows packing audiences, tons of merchandise, t-shirts, shoes, tea. I even read about a Kung Fu manual selling for nearly 10,000 yuan. That's over 1,000 pounds sterling.
Yeah, the numbers bandied about are staggering. Some Chinese media estimate the total annual income from IP, tickets, performances, other temples linked to Shaolin at somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 billion yuan.
That's not a temple, that's a multinational corporation's revenue stream.
Pretty much. And beyond the money, the international outreach was just as ambitious. First, overseas Shaolin Cultural Center in Germany, 2001. Delegations to the U.S. for Songshan Shaolin Monastery Day. He set up federations in Europe and North America, cultural festivals, visits to the UN, Harvard, even engaging with tech giants like Google.
The reach was just incredible. He wasn't just a monk, he was a global operator. And this role as a religious diplomatic ambassador, it was huge. accompanying President Hu Jintao in 2004, supposedly meeting with popes.
Right, and his success wasn't just, tolerated by the state. It seems it was actively integrated, leveraged for soft power, for revenue. He became president of the Henan Buddhist Association, vice president of the national one.
And kept getting elected to the National People's Congress, term after term since '98. Deeply politically connected. Wasn't there that story about Li Changchun, the Politburo Standing Committee member, calling him an old friend?
That's the report, yes. It shows his influence went way beyond typical religious circles. He was seen as an asset, projecting this image of traditional Chinese culture adapting to the modern world.
And speaking of adapting, his influence stretched into some really, really unexpected places. Get this. In 2018, the Abbot visits the China Academy of Launch Vehicle Technology, the Rocket Institute.
Yeah.
I mean, what was he doing? Consecrating the Long March rockets. It sounds like something out of a cheesy spy movie.
It certainly raised eyebrows, didn't it? An unusual stop for an abbot. But maybe it's just the clearest sign of how deeply intertwined he and Shaolin Inc. had become with the entire state apparatus. Not just soft power through kung fu, but showing influence across all sectors. Even, high-tech defense. Symbolic, at least.
Actually being here in China, traveling around a bit, it really strikes you how much the country has embraced this blend of deep tradition and hyper-modernization.
Mm-hmm.
You see it everywhere. The tech integration is just incredible. The buzzing streets, the food scene. Mm-hmm. There's such an energy.
Absolutely. It's palpable, isn't it? The dynamism. And it does put Shi Yongxin's whole strategy into a kind of context. Yeah. He was riding that wave, maybe even helping to shape it for religious institutions here.
Yeah, it's like I was just thinking about the street food we had last night. The way old traditions are presented with this totally modern twist. It feels very similar to what he tried with Shaolin.
A good analogy. That constant adaptation feels very much part of the culture here now. But going back to him, that CEO monk nickname, it always carried that edge, that sarcasm and irony.
Totally. Especially as the criticism sort of piling up. People really felt he was turning the temple into just a business, undermining its, spiritual side.
And that discontent wasn't new. It had been simmering for ages. Remember back in 2009, the official Shaolin website got hacked with messages like, Shaolin evildoer Shi Yongxin, go to hell.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
And then the whole rumored Shaolin Temple IPO thing later that year. Even though it was suspended, it caused nationwide outrage. Really cemented that over-commercialized image. The clash between monastic vows, poverty, chastity, and his apparent pursuit of wealth just became impossible to ignore.
And the personal allegations just kept surfacing. Reports of visiting prostitutes, having a mistress, going back as far as 2000, then that rumor in 2011 about him being arrested for solicitation.
Right. But the really big one hit in 2015. These detailed accusations came from someone using the name Shi Zhengi. Claims about holding 2 fukas, that's the household registration, being kicked out of the monastery twice for theft back in the 80s, even accusations of raping a Buddhist nun, having multiple mistresses like dozens, and fathering illegitimate daughters.
Just shocking stuff. But what's really crucial here and kind of confusing, didn't the official investigation back then actually clear him?
That's the key point. Provincial investigation reports after those 2015 claims did exonerate him. They basically concluded the accusations were unfounded at that time, which makes the current situation, it sets up a very stark contrast.
And that's exactly where it gets really interesting now. Because fast forward to July 27th, 2025, the Shaolin Temple itself announces Shi Yongxin is under criminal investigation.
The charges, or suspicions rather, misappropriating and embezzling funds and temple assets, and also maintaining improper relationships with multiple women, fathering at least one illegitimate child. Pretty similar to 2015, but now official.
And then, boom, the very next day, July 28th. The State-Supervised Buddhist Association of China approves revoking his ordination certificate, calls his actions extremely bad. He's just not a monk anymore, officially stripped. It's incredibly swift and decisive.
Yeah, the speed is telling. And there was even that fake online notice claiming he tried to flee the country with mistresses and kids. It got dismissed as fake, but it shows you the public narrative, right? What people were willing to believe.
Okay, so let's tackle the elephant in the room. These absolutely wild figures flying around online. U.S. $41.3 billion embezzled, and over 170 children. I mean, seriously, can you even imagine the logistics? The child support payments alone, that's a whole different kind of vow he'd be breaking.
Right. Look, those figures are, let's be very clear, they are completely unconfirmed and frankly, highly dubious. The sources reporting them explicitly state there's no corroboration for the $41.3 billion. No other reputable outlet has picked it up.
So probably just wild exaggeration.
Or a mistake.
Likely sensationalism, maybe a currency conversion error, HKD to UFD perhaps, that might bring it down, but still huge. And the over 170 children claim is similarly unverified and seems wildly improbable. I mean, if the $41.3 billion were true, he'd be one of the richest people on the planet, dwarfing figures like televangelist Kenneth Copeland. Doesn't RZA know about this? The Wu-Tang Clan needs to weigh in. This sounds like a supervillain plot.
Slight chuckle? Well, maybe. But jokes aside, these kinds of exaggerated claims, they serve a purpose, right? They tap into real public anxiety about corruption, about unchecked wealth and power, especially linked to supposedly spiritual figures. They become symbolic, powerful, regardless of the factual accuracy.
That makes sense. So if we connect the dots back to the political side, the allegations now are almost identical to 2015. But back then, he was cleared. Now he's investigated by multiple agencies, stripped of his status immediately.
Exactly. That's highly significant. It strongly suggests the issues were probably known or at least suspected before. But the decision not to act then versus the decisive action now.
So why now? What changed?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the $41 billion question, depending on who you ask. But seriously, it implies a definite change in the political climate or priorities within the government. The state exercises significant control here. This could be tied to broader anti-corruption drives. Or maybe internal power dynamics have shifted. A desire to reassert control, impose moral authority, especially over influential institutions like Shaolin.
I mean, part of me thinks, okay, maybe this is just straightforward accountability finally catching up.
Cleaning
house, and it feels like the right outcome, regardless of the why.
That's certainly one interpretation, and probably the one many hope is true. Accountability is needed. But you could also take a more, shall we say, cynical view, that this is a calculated political power play.
How so?
Well, given Shi Yongxin's deep connections over decades, taking him down now isn't just about him. It sends a message. It could be related to factional politics, maybe targeting figures linked to previous administrations. It reasserts party control over these powerful, quasi-independent figures and the soft power apparatus they manage, like Shaolin's global network. Perhaps the state decided his utility was outweighed by the liability, or they just wanted tighter reins. It's complex.
That's a much darker, more strategic read on it. Wow.
Yeah.
But whatever the high-level politics, the public reaction has been intense and laced with so much sarcasm. People online calling him the stockholder abbot or the listed monk.
Oh, absolutely. That CEO monk nickname always had that ironic bite, and the public is running with it. The online chatter joking about alimony for 170 kids, the funneling money comments, it shows this public appetite for sardonic commentary. But underneath the sarcasm, there's a clear demand for accountability. The sheer intensity of the reaction highlights that ongoing tension between state narratives and, public feeling.
So when we look back at his legacy, it's just incredibly complex, isn't it? Full of contradictions. He was, you can't deny it, a visionary in some ways. He put Shaolin on the global map using commercialization, branding, outreach.
Undeniably. He transformed its fortunes and reach. Yet that same tenure was constantly dogged by these really serious allegations, financial and personal.
And now this investigation, losing his monk status, it's got huge implications for Shaolin Temple itself, this 1,500-year-old icon of Chinese culture, but also for the image of Chinese Buddhism more broadly at home and overseas.
Definitely. And it could force a major rethink of that whole commercialization model used by many religious institutions here. A real reassessment of the balance between, staying afloat financially and maintaining spiritual integrity.
We have to remember, the investigation is still ongoing. The full story, the actual extent of any wrongdoing, the final consequences, that's all still unfolding.
Exactly. But the whole saga, it just perfectly highlights that constant, maybe unavoidable tension between ancient spiritual values and the pressures of modern life, commercial demands, state oversight. The story of the CEO monk is really a stark, kind of shocking testament to that dangerous intersection of faith, power, and immense wealth in our world today.
Well, we hope this conversation gave you some surprising insights, maybe sparked some curiosity. What do you think stands out most about this whole story?
Yeah, we'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below.
And if you enjoyed this journey with us on the Dragon Cruiser, please do give us a like, maybe share this with your friends, and definitely make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure.